Jaime from Inky&Scrappy, sharing with you today an Ink Road Stamps design team creation using House Husband and Snarky Housewife Vol.4, along with that magic window interactive die. So I started with some Neenah Classic Crest Solar White 80-pound cardstock in super smooth. I probably should have used my Express It cardstock, which is a little bit lighter weight, or even something a little bit lighter weight. But I got there in the end. I will show you how I kind of trouble, or maybe I should have used a little bit lighter weight paper on the other part, but I really felt I wanted a lot of weight for the other one, so it did cause me a little bit of issues just because the die didn't cut all the way through because it was so thick in the end. I'll explain why. So for this one, I wanted to use, this one comes with a circle. I want to say it's about a 4-inch circle that comes with it, so you can cut pictures with it or other things. So like if you're printing from a color printer, you could print it and then cut it. That's why I say like a heavyweight text paper would probably work pretty great. And I actually have some glossy print paper that works okay for alcohol marker coloring. It's not the greatest, but it, you know, if I was really worried about it, I could have gone that route, I guess. Ultimately, I made this one work. So I left this little part in because I don't always get a good impression. So I did end up flipping it over. Because these stamps are from 2 separate stamp sets, they're not always going to be the same exact thickness. If you know what I mean. Like they can just be a hair off and it's not going to stamp crisp and clean for you if you have mixed stamp sets on your platform. So keep that in mind. I knew after I did the first one that okay, it's not going to work, so I just peeled that second one off and then restamped that first image and got a crisp, clear impression the second time with it. So just keep that in mind. I also stamped them onto some Avery L removable label adhesive sheets and ran those through the Brother Scan and Cut on the line, so I didn't leave a shadow around it, or I didn't leave a border to my cut, I guess. So there you have it. So I'm bringing in some older colors that I had already put together. So these are all on my blog, InkyandScrappy.com. They're going to be in the right hand side. There is a tab that says Ohuhu Marker Blends, and they're all going to be right there. The colors that I'm going for are actually ones that I had converted from Copic to Ohuhu. So if you're interested in that, the Copic ones on this one are on inside the little brackets, and these ones are all using the Oahu, which is that fine tip marker from Ohuhu. So I kind of wanted to coordinate my colors, but not totally coordinate my colors. Does that make sense? And I also wanted a pop culture feel because I just felt this one was, I don't know. I wanted a pop culture poppy. I don't know. It was just, I wanted it bright and fun and bold and maybe a little bit sassy because maybe that's me with the megaphone and it's probably my husband telling me to, you know, make my face not look exactly what my thoughts are. I might suffer from that, but whatever. So I kind of laid in my shadows first. This is the first time I'm coloring the girl for sure, and I think it might be the first time I'm coloring the guy on this one, but it might not be. But I don't remember. You know, I color so much stuff. So usually I come in with my darkest. I hate going in with my lightest and then deciding later I want it to be darker. So I usually come in with my darkest right away, figure out where I want my darkest shades to be, and this is where I said I kind of coordinated them, so I did bring in that dark blue for the megaphone on this one, because then it just kind of coordinates with the outside and the inside image on this one are going to kind of, you know, roll together, or they color coordinate. It's, I don't know, it gives you a cohesive feel to your card inside and out, or, you know, when you're doing interactive, it gives that, you know, cohesive feel, even though I switched some color. So I was being lazy here and I just did some tip to tip with the lightest pink in my color combo to get her cheeks. So it was probably, I had probably just used it to color the inside of her mouth. And that was, yeah, you know, I, you know, like to save time and not have to pull out all the markers sometimes. So, and then for his skin tone, I went a little bit darker, probably that 189 is probably closer to what I did. I do slow down the markers when I get to the end here of the colors that I did actually use on the coloring. So if that's something you're interested in, on my actual colors that I did slow it down for you today. I did remember to actually, video that part. Sometimes it doesn't happen. I kept her hair fairly light, back in my blonde day when I was, did the blonde thing. Yeah. So there are the colors that I ended up using today. And then, of course, so sure, with a Brother Scan and Cut, you can probably like scan it into your computer or hook it up to your computer and figure out how to do the inside cuts. And I don't waste my time with that. I just, for what I use it for, scan it, cut it. The little inside pieces, usually I don't worry about them if I can color match with a marker. For this one, just because I knew I wanted to do something fun design-wise, I took the time to cut out the little extra bits. And it was just on her. So it was just in between the mouth and the megaphone, which was actually really easy because there's a cut line there anyways. It was just that little in between her elbow there in the backside was probably the hardest one to do. So I'm bringing in some Distress Oxides. I decided to go with some Twisted Citron here. I had to think. I always want to say what the close to my heart color combos are because that was ingrained in me for so long. I could probably tell you the close to my heart color, dye inks that would coordinate. Anyways, and then for her, I went with the squeezed lemonade on this one. I wanted to do something a little bit different, so I didn't want them to be exactly the same, but I didn't want them to be too far off on, on the pools, I guess. And then for this one, I'm bringing in, I want to say it's a composition stencil, so it kind of gives you that composition notebook look. So I started with the mustard seed for hers, and then I didn't clean off my stencil. I am notorious for this. So I just kind of made sure I inked up my green really good and went tone on tone on that one. Plus, I knew I was going to be picking up some of that dark yellow from my stencil because I'm lazy. Or like to save time. We'll say I'm a time saver. That sounds better, doesn't it? And my favorite part is always peeling off those masks. And then you get that glorious look. So she is going to be on the inside of this magic window die, and so I brought in the circle because I need her to fit in the said circle, and I need to make sure that he fits in said circle. And then I brought in that top piece to just kind of make sure that it was going to fit in there where I needed it to fit in there, that I was lining it up. So I really just brought in that top piece for that top arrow so I knew which side was up and exactly where she would fall in that cut line. I hope that makes sense. So for this one, this is going to be on the inside. This is where she's going to get glued to because I don't need the center part. I'm just going to do the outside, and I just do a little line on the outside. I did come in with a pencil and kind of mark, so I kind of knew where I needed to be on that one. And then I'm just going to turn it to make sure that I have enough real estate and it's colored properly to where I want it for the actual die. Now the important thing for this one is to make sure that you spread that glue on that whole circle piece before you put it down, because you don't want it to catch on anything later on, and it's going to be the easiest time to do it is right now. So this is where I'm coming in with my die again, and I'm actually going to cut it out. So I kind of line it up, and this one you kind of line up the outside of that circle that she's on to those little pieces that kind of come in a little bit more. I did run this one through 2 or 3 times in my die cut machine. I was hoping that it was going to give me enough. I did not put a shim under it. Maybe that would have helped. It was really thick to start with, so I knew that I might end up having to cut. So I did end up, it cut pretty good. I was kind of surprised. But I just wanted to clean up those lines a little bit more. I didn't want to have, like tears in them at all. So I did come in with my scissors here and kind of had to do a little bit of interactive surgery. I do a lot of interactive cards, so understanding them is really important when you're, modifying or doing anything. in that respect. And so if you know that this is a moving part, I want it to be glued down good, and I don't want it to have any glue on it. So I did come in with that adhesive eraser and kind of went over the whole thing just to get any adhesive that might have been from my tape on this one, to get that one down. And so I'm going to do the same thing with the front panel here, but this one I went all the way out to the corner. So these are cut down to 5.5 by 5.5. And I know that I'm going to use this top panel. The top piece doesn't actually cut out a full circle. It just cuts out like the slit in the circle and then the inside pieces. So I knew that I wanted my finished panel here to be 5.5 by 5.5. That is my probably the smallest. You could maybe go to 5.25 by 5.25, but I really think 5.5 gives you a better area to work with when it comes to putting it together, making it work without having any issues. I tried to sneak it to 5.25 and 5.25 for my first one, and I ran into a couple of issues because I wasn't exactly centered. So keep that in mind. I think 5.5 is probably your best one, and I'm going to do this one the same way I did the other one. And then, of course, smashing that down good in the center. And then, yes, you get a little wee bit of, design team footage in there because I have to take pictures for the actual design team stuff on Instagram. So I usually try to I take way more pictures than I actually need. But that's because I want to make sure I have sufficient ones. And then you only get to see 10, which is kind of sad because, I probably take 20 of them in the process. So this one was a little bit more fun to cut. It actually wasn't bad once I got the first ones done. And yeah, I did run this one through again 2 to 3 times to try to get it to go. And you see how dry my ink was because I'm a patient girl. It transferred onto my dies. Yeah, I should probably make sure I clean them before I play with them again. So I'm going to do this one again. I just want to make sure that those lines are going to be crisp and clean. I didn't have to worry about that center circle. I could just cut that one out because it's not needed. And then again, coming in with that adhesive eraser, I might have lifted some of that ink. So I just came in with my blending brush and kind of touched it up a little bit. No harm, no foul. So for this one, you have that circle piece that sits on top. Now, I know I was tried to be very careful with my placement when I placed my images to make sure that they weren't going to be covered up too much by that circle piece. At this point, I had not decided what I was going to do with said circle piece yet. Like, I knew that I had to do something with it, but I was kind of thinking about doing one of the pop culture things, which would be really cute in there actually as your centerpiece. Those were just too big for what I wanted, so I did end up using the circle as it was. So I'm just kind of laying in, and I decided to do my sentiments after everything because that way I knew where my top was going to be, my bottom was going to be. I could kind of work around my cut lines, make sure that I was all in, and so I did come in with some VersaFine Onyx black ink to stamp those on. It's usually my favorite for stamping sentiments, especially if I want to make sure that I get them right the first time and not have any issues. So I decided to pull in that bright pink from the outside, and then I just kind of layered some yellow on top to give it some bright. I just wanted it to be bright and bold. So I did heat set these just because I wasn't going to wait. B, I needed to do some anti-static powder on everything to kind of make sure things were going to move. And then I also didn't want to transfer ink from one thing to the next because I tend to get inky fingers. And I decided on the BAM for the center. Yeah, I really wanted to bring in the other pop culture images. I just thought that would have been fun. So, of course, we're lining it up on the opposite side that, it's not going to be straight up and down. So if your arrow was on the top, it's actually going to be kind of off to the side. So you're starting with that tab over onto the right side of your card. And I did bring in the anti-static powder quite a few times just because I really wanted to add some extra glide to it. It helps so it doesn't stick. You don't have, I don't know, it's just, things move better when there's glide. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Yeah, you want less friction, okay? So that anti-static powder is going to, if you don't have anti-static powder, baby powder works. I lived with baby powder in a little cloth bag that I made for years, and it worked fine. I'm allergic to cornstarch, so I think the anti-static powder is actually a clay. Don't quote me. Or tapioca starch works. I don't know. I have that in my pantry, but that's because I'm allergic to everything else. Anyways, back to this one. So carefully kind of tucking these in. They were super thick. I was very careful not to put a crease in them as I was tucking them. I was really worried it wasn't going to work. It was stupid thick. Did it work? It did. And I was super excited that it worked because it would have really sucked if it didn't. So once I have these all in here, I know that I need that star to be in the middle really good. And so this was kind of where I was a little afraid because it was a little bulky that it might not work. So that's why you're going to see me here like pushing it up as far as I can get it and making sure that it is flat. That is what I'm doing. It kind of had a slight little bow to it just because it was so thick. And so with interactive, sometimes you have to train your paper and, you know, so it's kind of just what you got to do. And so here's me hoping for the best that I have it lined up. It looks like it's a pretty good star, so I lined it up in the middle and went from there. So this is actually my fourth or fifth one. I've decided that just a little teeny tiny dot on each one of those petals towards the center, and then I place my little washer there to keep everything together. I don't have to worry about the glue like oozing in and through and sticking to parts it's not supposed to that way. So that's, you know, one of my tips. The other thing is bringing in this paper brad here. It doesn't always have to be like center. As you can see here, one side is way thicker than, or way further pulled out than the other. It's fine. So I'm going to bring in that BAM circle here and then just set it down, press it down, let it sit for a little bit so it can dry. I really do recommend either, I use glitter art glue. I just bought some Barely art glue, so I'm pretty sure they're going to work exactly the same, but I will let you know in a future video. So and this is where I'm working it, but I want to be careful with it. So when I did those cuts along the outside, like remember I said I wanted to make sure that there weren't any like, I don't know, what are they called? Like kind of like a jagged nail. So I didn't want any fuzzies or any, and there was one little spot that was a little bit like fuzzy and it would catch every time. So I just kind of kept working around and then pulling them through as I went around. I didn't want to pull on the tab too hard because I didn't want to rip it. Although this one's tab I think is very well thought out and put together and it stays together fairly well. If you've worked with lawn fonts, give it a whirl die. I'm not in love with that one. This one is way easier to me. So it just has, I don't know, it just seems to work a little bit better. I have some ideas to fix the lawn fawn one. Maybe. At least for me, because it doesn't work very well for me. But I just kind of ended up coming in with that scissors because that spot, I figured out where that spot was that was catching. It was just where it was. It just had a little bit of a burr. That's the word I was looking for. A burr on it, and it would catch. So keep in mind keeping it smooth. You could definitely take a file and just like lightly go along that if it's, you know, if that's something that you're worried about. For the most part, I tried to do the bare minimum to make my cards work. Are looking for a more detailed putting together of this one on my Salty Card channel. I did it in real time in the middle, so I will post that link below if you're interested. Anyways, back to this one. With that 5.5 inch, I have enough room. I don't have to worry too much about getting in the way of that tab there. So just the thin, I think it's an 1/8 inch foam strips, work all the way around. Keep in mind keeping that bottom one far enough away from your inside turning point, you know, tabs, and you should be fine. So in a previous card that I will get to, hopefully, I have to do edits yet, so hopefully next week it'll go up, I learned that you can put a little dot of glue onto that brad on the back, and then you can specifically place that front circle piece wherever you want, and it will stay, you know, upright. But it also gives me lots of ideas for something in the middle that you want to rotate. So I mounted that onto a 6x6 piece of green cardstock, and of course onto a cardstock base, or a 6x6 card base, and then I worked it a little bit. The more you work it, the better it's going to move for you, because paper kind of learns that way. So you should teach your face to use its inside voice. This would be my husband trying to tell me to behave myself, and here's me with the megaphone telling him that your opinion isn't part of the recipe, and keep it up and you'll be a strange smell in the end. Bam. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this one. Have an amazing rest of your day. Bye!